Thank you guys so much for joining us today as we talk about engaging children for the church. So is anybody here from out of town? Did anybody fly in here? No? You did?
I did. The Bay Area.
Okay,
Oh, nice.
Well, we're glad to have
Yeah,
you.
thanks for
So
coming.
we have a lot of locals here. Are you guys
San Diego.
San Diego?
Okay.
Beautiful. Did anybody work at church or any volunteers? How about yourself? What brings you here today?
Well, I came with my pastor to go to this whole process.
And you guys broke up a little bit? I'll tackle this.
Divide and conquer.
Yeah, I wish I'd known because my wife is, she's in charge of Sunday schools.
Okay. Well,
Hopefully,
maybe you can bring some of this back to her.
Hopefully it's
Thank you
helpful.
for joining us. As we get started, we're going to take the next while to talk to you guys about some of what we've done before, and then there'll be time for questions.
So we are Jordan and Kelli Ayotte. We're married, hence the same last name. We've got 2 kids. We have a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old, boy and girl. And we're from Sandals Church, which is a multi-site church here in California. And we've worked in ministry for about 13 years, but specifically for the last 8 years, Jordan and I have worked together in children's ministry. We've done a lot of creative things. We brought some stuff to share with you today, some of the things that we've created over the years. We've done a lot of strategy, a lot of vision casting for our children's ministry at Sandals. Specifically, what we came into the role to do, which we'll talk about a little bit, is to create programming for kids. And so actually just this past December, our team finished a 3-year curriculum through the Bible. It's fully original content. And we'll talk about that process. We'll talk about the purpose behind it. But that was kind of the big task that we were given, that it's been a process, and it's been really, really awesome. So that's something that we've gotten to work on. And so today we're going to talk about what it looks like to engage kids kind of through that process. We're going to talk about kind of where we started with when our church was kind of a 2-campus church and how it's grown into 13 campuses, and how we've taken content, how we've taken just principles of engagement to an online capacity, and then ended up reaching a bunch of hundreds and thousands of kids around the world. So specifically in terms of engagement, we're going to cover 3 things today. We're going to talk about the idea of filling the gap. This is a phrase that Jordan and I have lived by. It's a question that we've asked, how are we filling the gap? So we're going to help define that for you and talk about and identify what that might look like for you in your ministry and at your churches. And then we're going to talk about how to engage kids, not only within the walls of the church, but also outside of the church and what that looks like. And we're going to cover 3 specific things. We're going to talk about culture, we're going to talk about scale, and we're going to talk about needs.
But first, I want to kind of share a little bit of how we got here. As you heard Kelly say, we are married and we work together, which means that we drive together every day. We spend every second with each other. When at the end of the day, when we say, "How's your day?" the other person said, "You tell me." It was your day too. So I have a question for you guys. So thinking about if you're married or if you're dating somebody, you raise your hand if you think you could work every single day with your significant other. Okay, cool. That's on. Okay, raise your hand honestly. Honestly, if you're like, there's no way, we just couldn't do it. Yeah, I think that what we have is very unique. So we actually go to a family dentist, where the married couple work together, and so we share that with them. And I said, how do you guys make it work? I don't know if you know this, by the way, but what their strategy is, they drive to work separately. They said, look, I want to listen to my own music. You're a chatterbox. I just want to just focus. And so, which I thought was hilarious. And sometimes they drive home separately to eat lunch because they live 5 minutes away. And then they drive back in. So, but it's worked for us. Not us, yeah. We only have that one car that's working pretty good. So we go together. So we've been married for a while. And before that, the cool thing was we were friends first on staff. And we got teamed up all the time. So they would say, hey, you guys work really well together, work on this project. And then we started dating, and then we got married. And fast forward, we had our first kid, and they said, hey, we want you guys to take over the kids ministry. And so I actually have kind of a background in doing kids ministry because my parents, they said, we want to serve somewhere at the church, but we want to serve as a family. And so when I was 8, we started serving in kids ministry, doing plays and all of that fun stuff. But fast forward to us taking over kids ministry, our job title was this: make the weekends great. That was literally what it was.
So it was this very broad, like, what does that mean? It feels kind of arbitrary. Like, how do you define that? So it really was like, okay, how do we engage our kids? At the time, one of the staff members who was working in children's ministry said, hey, the ministry's on fire, please help. So that's kind of the context that we walked into. And so we had to start figuring out, like, okay, what does it look like to engage these kids then and actually make the weekends great? So the first thing to really think about, kind of just big picture, this is probably something if you are already in kids ministry or just looking at the current world culture of like what we're facing potentially or specifically in terms of the church. There's a couple different things to think about as you think about reaching kids for the church. So one of the big things is that there's just in general a shift in cultural value. There's a lot of attitude and change in how people see and view the church, how they experience church. If you're on social media at all, you've probably heard the phrase deconstruction. That is a very popular trend right now of people who grew up in the church, who grew up in the faith. A lot of them are probably our age or a little bit older. But they're going through this process of saying, like, I don't think that what I learned is important to me anymore. Not necessarily that they've stopped believing in God, but they're like, you know what, like all those rules and regulations, like I'm out. I don't want to be a part of that anymore. And those are the people that are raising the next generation or will raise the next generation. So that's something we're up against. We have parents raising kids to believe that the church is not trustworthy. The church is not safe. The church is no longer a priority or a value. And so that's a huge thing that we're just facing the reality of. There's not really a respect for the church anymore the way that there used to be. You went to church because that's just what you did, but that's just not the case anymore.
Another one that comes up is just decreased family involvement. With making church a priority, I think that I'd say it, for a lot of them, it's maybe I'll go, maybe I won't. If I was invited, definitely not going for Super Bowl Sunday because that's my day. With my religion. And I think that COVID really increased this decreased family involvement where people realized I don't need to be at physical church anymore to worship, or maybe I'm going to choose not to go to the physical church anymore. So that rhythm of gathering together it's just that we've lost some of that. And that's a way that it's difficult to engage kids.
Yeah. And so there really is just a difficulty in how we connect with the younger generation. Kids want something that is meaningful and relevant to them. They don't want to just do the thing because they want to do the thing. Kids are smart. And so they're like, well, is this personal to me? Why does this matter to me? Is it meaningful? Is it relevant? And if you think too about the quality of the media that our kids are consuming right now, when you think about the Disney Plus and the Netflix, like it's good quality stuff. And there's some good stuff out there, there really is. But when you think about this is what they're consuming on a regular basis, and now, hey, come to church on Sunday, and I don't know if the quality is going to be the same. How do we engage them in that same way? That is what we're competing against a little bit. Think about maybe even the influencers that kids are being influenced by, the people that they're listening to, the people talking about deconstruction. And honestly, those people are convincing. They're not dumb people. Like I know even for me, I was raised in the church. I have been in the faith my entire life, but I've heard people talk about deconstruction. And I'm like, I need to go back to scripture, and I have that foundation of faith, but a lot of our kids who are outside the church or even in the church don't have that foundation. So it's very easy for them to be swayed by what they're being influenced by outside of the church. And so there's just a general disinterest in church. So this is not to discourage. There is good news at the end of this, but it's important to be aware. Like this was something we realized 8 years ago when we were tasked with the challenge of engaging kids. And it was different back then. I think coming out of COVID, we see this even more. People leaving church, realizing I don't need to be there in person. Maybe this actually doesn't matter to me. So it's even more important to really be aware of the shifts in culture, and they're going to keep changing and keep shifting. The good news is, though, the church is not gone. The church is not lost. There's still opportunity for creativity. There's opportunity for innovation, and there's opportunity for the church to overcome a lot of these challenges. And there's some really great ways that we can do this.
So now we're going to jump into the idea of filling the gap. Kelly, do you want to talk about?
Yeah. So, okay, so yeah, let's talk about filling the gap. So when we say fill the gap, This is basically what it means. It's about identifying and addressing some of the things that might be missing, or there might be opportunities to make better. So I mentioned when we stepped into kids ministry, they were like, hey, it's on fire, please help. And so we had to kind of start by going, well, what's missing? What can we identify? What can we address that's not working? And that's how we identify what the gaps are. So this might be, so if you think about your ministry or your church, or whatever you're involved in, like think about what processes are in place that maybe have some broken areas. What kind of structure? What is the overall organization? We're talking about weekend programming. How do we organize the weekend program when we think about kids? Is it kind of chaotic? Is it all over the place? Is there an actual structure? Are there certain things that we have in place that are keeping kids or even preventing in some way from them experiencing Jesus and experiencing the Bible in an engaging way that, again, is meaningful and personal to them? That's really, really important. And so we have to think about who our kids are, the demographic of our kids, developmentally, where are our kids? These are all different things that we can look at to help us identify the misses and the gaps in how we're engaging kids. And then when you start to think through the solutions and the answers, they should fill that gap. Sometimes those are big things, sometimes those are small things, but that's kind of the idea behind filling the gap.
So as we jump back 8 years ago, starting to lead the kids ministry, here are 3 themes that we found with filling the gap that I think will be helpful for you. The first one was our culture. So the culture that we saw at our campus with kids was a lack of consistency. And what that means is that there were kids that were showing up that were being dropped off late. There were kids that were only coming once every 4 weeks. We did a survey and a study and saw, hey, they're only coming once every 4 weeks, which means they're either jumping in at the middle of a series or they're getting the tail end. Another thing was that they were going to different services in the day, right? We had 4 services at the time with our one campus. So they would show up to the early service and they would meet a friend, but they wouldn't see that friend again for another 4 weeks. And then even if they did come back, they would go to the night service. So all that lack of consistency left them not feeling loved, cared for, bought in, that they were building relationships. And this lack of consistency, like even with leaders too, of coming in, dropping out, there was just this overall cultural, hey, we'll show up when we want to. And I can understand why parents would drop their kids off 10 minutes after service starts because nothing was going on. Like we had built the culture of, well, we'll just wait till everybody gets here. We won't start on time. And so the parents know, well, nothing's going to happen. So if I drop my kids off 10 minutes later, who cares? There was no even reason for them to come consistently to the same service because the leaders weren't pouring into the kids. So here's a couple of things that we started doing that we identified as, hey, we can change the culture if we do these things. And the first thing that we did was that we started creating interactive content. When we first started, someone would just stand at the front and grab a Bible, read through a passage, and then just ask a couple questions. But these are kids. We wanted to meet them at their level and have a fun way for them to call and respond. Ruth, would you mind hitting play on this first video? So the first thing that we did was we started creating plays. And this is a play that we did called The Missing Piece, where we were discovering who Jesus was. And so we built a set, and there's me with a weird hat on and a trench coat.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was very fun. A lot of this stuff was not built, but borrowed. We borrowed much of it, and your dad built the walls and everything. So we started creating ways for kids to raise their hand and answer questions, to jump on stage and solve clues. Another series that we did was a superhero series about the armor of God. And that was super fun as kids were learning all these different pieces of the armor that they would put on in their life. Another thing that we noticed, because we noticed kids were coming in late, was what if we did something engaging in the beginning of service? And so instead of starting service right when service would start, at 9, we started 10 minutes before with something that we call a pre-show. And the reason why is we wanted kids to build relationships with us, with the other volunteers, and make the volunteers heroes by bringing them up and having them do funny challenges. And what this changed was that kids started dragging their parents to church. I got to get there on time. I got to get there early, right? So the cool thing was it would go 5 minutes into service, which meant that they're not losing out on any of the teaching, any of the worship, any of the small group time. We really kept them wanting to come back early. And then the last
What
thing,
did you do again during the pre-show?
so we would do some fun games. We would celebrate birthdays. We would recognize new guests. We would honor volunteers who'd been there. So it was a lot of, we focused on that fun element that would bring a kid to church early. Oh yeah, so these are some of just, at the time, some of the iPhone videos that we would shoot and play before service would start. Just silly things. You'll notice all the footage is very grainy because it's just us with our iPhones saying, hey, what's something fun we can do to show the kids? And it really, we saw a change in kids being like, we have to get there early. And if a kid gets there on time, that means the parent gets into service on time and they're not frazzled and they have a moment to worship and they're not missing out on communion and all of those things. And then the last thing that we started introducing were incentives to come back every week. So when we did that Armor of God series, we created buttons for each piece of armor. But the only way to get them was if you were there that week. I missed last week because I couldn't. Sorry, you got to be here every week. And guess what? We grew in our kids ministry like 3 times over. Yeah, it tripled how many kids were coming through incentives. This was actually for that superhero series where we had a cereal box they could purchase with a shirt, and you can see all the different armor pieces right here. There was a song attached to it. And so we started building that kind of collection that kids could have that they would put on their library shelf at home and things that they could collect. And that's one of the ways that we changed the lack of consistency in the culture. So here's a challenge for you guys. After this, at some point, think about the culture at your church or within your ministry and think about maybe the misses or the gaps that currently exist and begin thinking strategically about the best ways to fill those gaps.
Okay, so that identified some initial gaps that existed when we stepped into the ministry, but then we faced the next gap. At that time, we only had 2 campuses. Well, we grew to 10 campuses over the next couple of years. And so the solution of a live play, which required a lot of volunteers and costumes and set pieces and the cost for handing every kid a button, that was not scalable at 10 campuses. And so we realized, okay, we still have the task of engaging kids well, but we cannot keep up this pace. It just doesn't work. We don't have the resources for it. Oftentimes, when you try to do big things in a lot of different places, you also lose quality, you lose excellence because the experience is no longer consistent. You just can't quality control that many places, that many campuses, that many people. So we had to come up with what the next solution was. And this is important to note that in this process of engagement, what used to work may work for a time, but you have to regularly identify and figure out, we face another gap. How do we get agile? How do we adapt to filling that gap? So for us, as we kind of process through what was next, how do we make the experience excellent? How do we make it scalable? How do we make sure that the experience for every single kid works across the board? Was moving to a fully video-based curriculum. Now, I think at this point, it's not uncommon to see curriculum for kids be video-based, but at the time, people were kind of weird about screens. Like it was a little bit more taboo. There were a couple organizations that were doing video content, but it kind of was this new thing of like, do we want to put another screen in front of kids? And going back to one of those challenges we face is these kids have Disney. Can we create something that's as engaging or more engaging than Disney? Because we do not have the money that Disney has, so what do? So obviously Jordan shared he has a video in background, and so we started thinking, okay, how do we make something that kids are going to be excited about that's going to engage them with the Bible, with truth, and with Jesus? So we basically came up with this idea to create a movie. So we created a 1-hour-long movie. It is called The Wild Library. And we created a 6-week series out of that. So we showed the kids 10 minutes of the video every week for 6 weeks. And it was a 6-month project. I wrote the script in like a week. We had volunteers that came out. We built our own set. We filmed the whole thing. We had some very late nights. We made like little miniature props. We had some friends come in and be the actor and actress for the movie. It was incredible, and it was received super, super well. The kids loved it. We continued some some cost-effective incentives. We gave the kids a handout every single week, but the kids loved it. They were like, we get to watch a movie in church. This is incredible. And again, we saw attendance, stay at that triple number, which was really, really awesome. At the end of the series, we invited all the families to come out for a movie night. So we like packed out our auditorium. We showed the full movie. It was a huge, huge win. Before I get to what our next challenge is, I'd love to show you guys the trailer for the Wild Library.
Ruth, it's the second video.
My name is Jamie, and this is my story. But I am not the hero.
Jamie, open the book.
I know what happened now. The Bible is filled with so many stories, so many miracles, and the most wonderful promises. God's word is alive and powerful. All you have to do is open the book. Open the book. Some people say you can't judge a book by its cover. I say, judge the book by its author.
Ruth, if you want to just press play on the third video too, and let that just run.
So that was the trailer. If you saw all those, we built a library. In one small office room, we had 12 shelves that we filled with lots of fake and real books. We moved the shelves in a lot of different configurations. But like I said, it took us 6 months. It was a huge hit. Leadership loved it. And they were like, can you do it again, but can you cut the time in half? Well, we could.
How long was that one?
So that movie was an hour long. It took us 6 months to make.
Okay.
Yeah, it was
time in producing it.
Yeah,
Three
from
months.
pre-production, production, and post was a 6-month process. Yeah, so it was significant for sure. So obviously we figured out the scalability. We realized, okay, we're going to move to this format of video, but we did face another gap. So here's my next challenge on the topic of scale. Think about different processes or different structures that you currently have in place in your ministry or in your church that might be keeping you from simplicity or engagement. So for us, it was the complexity of creating a live performance that wasn't scalable. We had to shift that. Even though it was great, we had to make that shift. So think about maybe some of those things that are too complex that are currently going on. Figure out where you can cut, where you can adapt, where you can change those things in order to accommodate what's actually needed and what's actually possible.
So the third gap that we're going to talk about is the needs. We couldn't keep up with the pace of moving to 3 months for this series. So we actually had to just take a look and say, what do our kids actually need? What are families actually needing? What's our demographic? What are we trying to do? What are we trying to accomplish? I don't think the kids needed us to spend 6 months. And then we thought, do we maybe buy a curriculum? Do we make our own entire curriculum? And I think that was cool. What was cool was that our staff said, hey, we're going to give you the chance to make your own content, which not everybody has to do, but we wanted to take up that challenge. But we had to think through, what are we bringing to the table that's different, that's new? I don't want to add just white noise to awesome, amazing curriculum that's already out there. So we thought about our demographic, the kids who are our customers, and what would benefit them, how to best engage them based on their specific needs. And so we started looking outside the church and saying, what have some maybe smaller companies done that has been something unique that's put them on the map? Two that come to mind for me are, have you guys heard of Tom's Shoes? Tom's Shoes has a really cool program that's basically if you buy one pair of shoes, they will donate the other pair to someone in need. Now, if you've seen Tom's Shoes, they're not going to compete with Nike or Adidas. Their shoes are just lower quality. And so you're like, why would they even jump into the shoes race? Why would they even try to make a pair of shoes? But they found out their unique bend, which was like, hey, we're going to offer these lower price shoes and then give them to somebody in need. People were bought onto that like wildfire, and they were like supporting something that was helping someone else out. Have you guys heard of Warby Parker? Okay, cool. They create glasses, and I wore glasses almost my whole life. But I'd always go to the optometrist and try on the 3 pairs of glasses that they had. Warby Parker's design was, how can we make something unique? What's something different to add to the table? And so they will send you 5 pairs that you choose of glasses that you can try on for 5 days, walk around. They send it to you for free, which their model made it very personal and convenient for you. Those are 2 examples of these small companies diving into, like, how can we compete with Nike? How can we compete with a glasses company? And they found their unique bend to actually add something to value there, to add a need that maybe people were looking for.
Yeah, so when you look at these 2 companies, they had a unique audience or a unique customer base that had a unique need. So they had to figure out, well, how do we fulfill that need in a unique way? Some of the key words, again, there was something convenient in Warby Parker. There was something personal in both of those circumstances. For Tom's, it was people felt like, oh, awesome, I get to be part of something that's bigger than me, that's meaningful, that's impacting the world in a positive way. So we kind of took those ideas and thought, okay, well, who are our unique customers? And in our case, it's kids. What are their unique needs? And then how do we fill that need in a unique way? And so in this process of kind of figuring this out and going like, where do we land? The answer was found in the vision of our church, which is all about authenticity. So for Sandals Church, the vision of the church is to be real with ourselves, God, and others. And so at the time, the concept of being real was very prevalent. Like we were talking about it from stage, our pastors were talking about it. It's a very obvious thing when you come to any of our campuses that's kind of our mission and vision. And so lots of conversations existed around the idea of being real, but there was one group that wasn't talking about it, and that was kids. And so we realized, man, if this is the vision of our church, we want to share that with our kids. We want our kids to be a part of that. And so we realized that if we're going to go into this new season of creating original content and putting all the work into it and figuring out what the strategy is behind it, it was all going to be filtered through the idea of being real. That was for us. That's where we landed. We had a very specific mission now of what we were creating would be filtered through that idea. And what was so awesome about it and what we really saw was kids going, I get to be a part of what my mom and dad are a part of. I get to be a part of the whole church. I'm not just out like in the back in my kids' ministry room playing with my toys. I get to be a part of what the adults are part of. And what we also saw with that was a really unique way to help families engage with one another, like families getting to talk about authenticity and being real and what that vision meant and what that looked like to live it out in their faith. And so it was a really, really unique way to connect everybody at the church. And so that is the unique need that we filled for our unique customers.
So here is our challenge to you. It's to identify the needs of your kids. What's missing from their experience of the church? Is it maybe a fun way to engage with the Bible? Is it consistent leaders? Is it something that connects them to the church in a bigger and more profound way, like connecting adults and kids together on the mission of your church? And then as you figure that out, figure out how you can fill that gap.
Okay, so we kind of gave you a broad picture of some of the steps we personally took in figuring out what are we trying to accomplish, how do we engage kids, what are the gaps that we need to fill so that we can continue moving forward. And so specifically as we talk about engaging kids within the walls of the church, besides programming, besides some of the things we talked about, there's a very key role that exists within the church that has to be excellent for kids to be engaged, and that is your volunteers. The fact is, church is run on volunteers, and so we have to do a really great job with our volunteers in order for them to do a really great job with our kids. So we talked about culture. So when you think about the inner walls of your church, first, again, going back to this idea of what is the culture we want to create? What is the vision? What is the mission? What is the strategy? What are we trying to accomplish? And basically, once you can establish that, everything else you do should be filtered through that idea. So when we think about volunteers, it is important that we not only train our volunteers well, but we also care for them very well. Obviously, someone that feels cared for, if you even think about your daily job, if you feel like you're not noticed or cared about at your job, it's probably hard for you to show up. You might even quit if you can. But we think about our volunteers, man, we are giving them a huge responsibility and trusting them to be with kids, to share truth with our kids. And so we want to make sure that they feel cared for, that they feel bought in, that they feel that they're a part of something that's bigger than themselves as well. Volunteers who are cared for are more willing to show up eager and ready to go. They'll show up early, they will show up prepared, and all of the above. So that might just be like getting them donuts one weekend. That might be connecting with them throughout the week and praying for them, checking in on them, making sure that you know them personally, maybe what's going on in their life if they're willing to share with you. And those are the people that are going to show up and do a great job for kids. The other thing too, in the training component of volunteers, it's important to have really great, thorough, and clear and concise training. And we're going to talk about some of the ways that we put together some specific structures that help to do that with our volunteers. But we've trained hundreds of volunteers, and we see there's such a huge shift when they feel like they understand what the expectations are for them when they come in. A huge piece in engaging kids well is class management. That's a very, very, very important and key tool that should exist in the training process of volunteers. At least for us, we have a lot of young people that come in to serve. We have a lot of people that aren't parents or don't have a background in education. So the thought of how do I manage kids can be very foreign or overwhelming. So giving them practical hands-on tools of how to manage that well, because the fact is if the kid is distracted and it's chaotic, they're not engaged. There's almost no point to try to like get them to listen or learn something and walk away with something if they're not managed well. So that doesn't mean being a mean person. That just means learning tools about class management. But honestly, the state of your volunteer teams is going to make or break your culture. Back in the day, we definitely had some volunteers that were very resistant to change. And we're in a church where we change a lot and we change quick. And that's about adapting and being agile. And we saw people resistant to that. And so again, that's something that can really poison culture. So it's important to make sure that we're caring and training our volunteers well. And then also just thinking again about how are you structuring your programming? How are you breaking down and organizing time? What kind of structures and processes are in place to create your culture that you want to create?
So another thing I want to talk about here is the scale. What does your service look like from top to bottom? Thinking about volunteers, is this something that they have to add 5 extra hours to their week to make happen? Is somebody having to run to the dollar store to pick up tons of bananas for this activity? As we were looking at other crafts and activities that other churches have done, we realized, man, the amount of materials, the cost that would involve. So thinking through what can you do that's low effort and high impact? What are simple, non-complicated processes that you can use to outline your experience for kids that can be done easily, but still make a profound difference in the lives of your customer? So your volunteers, they already have their full-time jobs, and then they're coming on the weekend to hang out and add some more time to their week. And you want them to focus on loving the kids, on being there with them, on sharing the gospel. And so for us, we created this video, allowed for less volunteers to have to actually teach on stage so they could really focus on the class time with the kids. Now, what I would say about this is in no way are we suggesting that you need to make your own curriculum. It really is taking a look at the structure of your service from top to bottom. Are you funneling kids through a posture of worship, through a time of hearing about the Bible and having great conversations? How are you funneling and how is this scalable? It's not just going to burn out all of your volunteers and they walk away, or even just burn you out of the amount of work that you're having to do to make this happen each week. So the win for us was that the structure that we came up with required less prep and less dependence on volunteers to teach, but instead it freed them up to build real relationships, and that was something that was scalable.
Okay, so the last piece of engaging kids within the walls of the church is going back to this idea of needs and identifying what are the needs of the kids in your church. So for us, it was lacking of talking about the vision of being real and what that meant for them. So what are the needs of kids at your church? I think one of the shifts that was recognized for us, and this really aligns with the vision of our church, was that Yes, we want to teach kids the Bible. We want them to know the Bible stories. We want them to have a foundation for their faith. Those are very, very important things. However, they also need experiences that are going to change their life and transform their heart to know and love and fall in love with Jesus. And so freeing up our volunteers to just build relationship and make sure our kids know that they're loved and seen and heard allowed them more space to actually take in the truth of the Bible and what they were learning on the weekends. We go back to, the idea of Tom's and Warby Parker and thinking about how we reach the younger generation, creating experiences that are meaningful and personal to them, making the Bible feel relevant, because often it's easy to go, that was written thousands of years ago. Why does this matter to me? How do you make the Bible personal? What kind of conversations are being had? What kind of examples are being given so that kids feel like this is real, this is personal to me, this is meaningful to me. And giving them an opportunity to be part of something bigger than themselves, something that is profound. So thinking about, are there serving opportunities that your kids can be a part of where they're rubbing shoulders with maybe older people that could end up being a mentor to them? One of the things that we used to do is we had a group of kids that I used to lead that would lead worship. And I didn't just let them go on stage. They had to earn their place on stage. And we talked about leadership. We talked about what the responsibility was in leading worship, what worship meant. And they had to go through these different stages to basically get on stage. But once they actually got to a place of getting to lead worship, they were like, I get to be part of something really, really big and really awesome. And what that became was, because I gave them a big responsibility, it changed how they navigated the rest of life. They were like, I'm valuable, I matter. I'm not just a kid who just gets to be in a corner and be like, oh, I'll worry about you later. Like I get to lead something, and I get to have a profound role in what we're doing here. We also have an experience for kids that are there for more than 2 services. Maybe their parents are serving rather than having those kids watch the service twice. We include them in community outreach projects. So that might be writing letters to our goers overseas. But again, what are the opportunities we can give them to make them feel that they are part of something bigger and make sure that they know that they're valuable and they have something to offer there. These are all places where, again, with the importance of volunteers, these are great opportunities for volunteers to lead in different ways and lead those kids in different ways. But making sure the biggest need that we're fulfilling is that volunteers are showing up prepared, that they're involved, they're proactive, that your volunteers are worshiping alongside kids, that whatever asking the kids to do, the volunteers are doing it too, that they're setting that example. That volunteers know kids and families personally and by name. That's another really important way to engage kids in the church is, again, making them feel known and seen, and volunteers who participate in all those different aspects. So for us, we figured all this out, and we went through all these steps and processes. We figured out, okay, we're going to make content. This is how we're going to do it. Trained volunteers. Figured out a lot of great ways to engage kids within the walls of the church. We had grown, I think, to 12 campuses by this point. And then if you all remember, there was this thing in 2020 called COVID. And so that hit, and that's when we realized, oh, we can't rely on volunteers anymore because our church doors are closed. How do we continue engaging kids? And this led us to, how do we engage kids outside the walls of the church?
Part 3, engaging kids outside of the walls of the church. So as we talked about, volunteers are so important for engaging kids inside the church. What's important to engage kids outside of the church is that buy-in and helping parents and families, parents and guardians. So when COVID hit for us, everything shut down. And now that huge part of, we got to resource the volunteers, make them ready. We didn't even have volunteers anymore because kids were only able to watch online. And luckily, since we had made video, that was something that we were able to jump on really quick. But now it was, how do we resource the parents who at this point are pulling their hair out? They're nervous. And so I think before, everything that we created was this come to us model. I think a lot of churches do that. We've got something fun for them to do. You don't want to miss out on the buttons. You don't want to miss out on that. Come to us for this event. But this was an opportunity for us to live on mission and go to them. That's what changed. It changed for us to say, wait a second, we're going to go to you now. What do you need? When do you need it? What time? So we identified a couple times in the day was for the morning. That was a need that parents and kids had. Parents are getting ready for work. Kids need breakfast. They needed time to just relax and focus on the Bible. So we created a segment called Morning Devotions. And this was a time for kids to sit, hang out with us as we worshiped. We literally said, hey, enjoy eating your breakfast. I know that you're in your jammies. We're going to talk about something amazing that God has done in our lives, and a real story of a real person and how God changed them. Then we looked at even lunchtime, and just any moment midweek, we created something called Quiz Time and Backyard Biology. And these were live segments that we did on Instagram where kids could actually hang out with us, right? Because everything was just video on demand. There was no way for them to interact with us at all, or even us to respond to them. And so we did little quizzes about different passages from the Bible. We also would talk about what happened previously in the weekend service, which was a way to kind of reinforce what they learned. And then I love this. For our early childhood folks, we would read them storybooks on Instagram, which was really cool. And so we're like, we got to do something for the kids, for the little early childhood kids. And so we would go live and we would read a storybook with them, and we would kind of do a bedtime story. And so once again, parents just would eat that up and sit with the kids. This is a book that we made for Good Friday to pass out to kids during Easter. You guys are welcome to look through. And so, but the main thing I want to talk about is just how we moved to, go ahead.
Do you sell those materials?
They are just free. So we don't have many physical copies of the book, but we have there's links, right, that you can go to.
So this Good Friday book, we did print about 6,000 copies, and we gave it out as a resource to community groups and families. So there was no cost involved. But yeah, we've made about 55 storybooks, and most of them are digital. But yeah, there was an agreement early on. We don't sell resources. We provide it free. We've also provided different series we've created to other churches who may have found a value in using that as a resource. So yeah, we just distribute it at no cost.
Yeah, at that time, the phrase was content is king, because it was like, there's nothing out here. What do kids go to? And so we had, if you guys have heard of Yippee TV, they're like a Christian streaming platform, but they reached out to us and they said, hey, could we just have your content and put it on our site where we get a lot of traffic? And we said, absolutely. And so they have more people following them than we do in our small, box. And so now some of our stuff is on Amazon and Roku, and that was a really cool partnership. Just take it and play it.
Yeah, you mentioned that when COVID hit, we had a digital platform. So sandalskids.tv is our digital platform. That's where we put up our weekend services, and along with the small group resources. Those are free. It's an open platform. So if you want to check it out, you can kind of see the series that we're currently in and different things that we've made on there. But yeah, that's another example of a free resource.
Yeah. So for us, before there was parent engagement, but this was the first time that parents were not only integrated and aware of the content that their kids were learning, but it was the first time that we saw parents actively involved in the discipleship of their kids because they were watching the videos with them. We created small group activities that parents would do with their kids. They would read the stories with us. And so this was a really great time of parents being involved in what their kids were learning.
Mm-hmm. So if we go back kind of what we did and what we learned in COVID and even what we've carried out post that, because I think a lot of churches learned a lot of things in COVID. And one of the key things is we have to make a shift. If we don't shift and change what we were currently doing or previously doing, I don't know that we will survive. And so if we go back to those three things, culture, scale, and needs, when we look at the culture at the time, what kind of culture were we trying to create? Well, we still wanted to provide a way for parents to disciple their kids, be with their kids. And so that was why we created this extra content so they could consistently keep that up and resource them in that way. It was scalable because we were creating additional content that could be accessed whenever and wherever for free. You could pull it up on a computer, on a phone, tablets. We had kids at home, 4 kids in a family. You're like, everybody needs a device so they can watch and continue engaging. And it was really cool to see all different ages of siblings watching the same thing. Families were watching. They were all engaged together and participating in it together, which was really awesome and really increased the engagement. And then we were fulfilling needs. We were giving resources that helped parents continue discipling their kids, even though they weren't coming to a physical location every weekend. We were partnering with parents, like you talked about, who were overwhelmed, who were burdened, who were scared. And we said, hey, we're here, we've got you. And sometimes it wasn't a resource, it was, can we just pray for you? That's all you need right now, and we're here to do that. And then also partnering with kids. You talked about mail time. We had kids writing in letters, sharing their thoughts, their prayers, talking about some hard things, and just wanting to share with us, and then we would write back and we would respond. But again, the need that we were really fulfilling during that time was, you guys are not alone. We are here together. We're all in this together, and we want to support you through that.
Kelly mentioned briefly meal time. I think I did miss that when I was talking.
Oh, sorry.
But one of my favorite things that we did that I would highly encourage you guys to do is this opportunity for kids to write in letters. And what we noticed is that kids felt alone and they had questions. And so we started this segment called Mail Time, which was, we were on video and kids were watching wherever they were at. This is an opportunity for us to open their letter in front of them watching and to respond to what they were saying. And they got very honest with us about what was going on and what they were scared of, and for asking for prayer for their parents. And then we had parents sending in letters saying, thank you so much for what you're doing. And it was just this great osmosis coming together of us literally being able to write to them and answer their questions, do silly challenges. And we knew that it was working when we started getting letters from England and Australia and Canada and Texas and Mississippi and Wyoming and 25 other states. And these are people that we've never met before, and going, oh, we have gone to them now. We've lived on mission, and we found a way to reach people outside of the walls of the church.
And I think because they got to be a part of the experience, so it became meaningful and personal to them. I get to write a letter. My letter's on the video. They're talking about my letter. Oh, they wrote me back. They sent me a sticker. And so figuring out a way for them to be involved in what was happening, not just, oh, they're over there and I'm here consuming. They actually got to be a part of the experience.
So COVID taught us a lot, and we carried several of those lessons into ongoing ways that we connect with parents and families outside of the walls of the church. So here are a couple ways, a couple suggestions to regularly engage with kids outside the walls. So think about your social media. This is probably one of the best ways that parents can see what's going on. They can see if their kids are having fun. They can hear about new series that are coming up, or just what summer camp, all of those different things. I would suggest, if you have an opportunity to add stuff to YouTube or some type of way for kids to stream, because this is a great evangelism tool. We put a lot of these just fun videos up, and kids are able to share it with their friends while they're at sleepovers, or if they have just a buddy come hang out with them. Hey, can we watch YouTube Kids? Yeah, but only Sandals Kids. So we've heard lots of good stories of them kind of saying, hey, this is from my church. You got to watch this. This is hilarious. And another great suggestion that just kind of happened was teaming up with what the main service was doing. Because most of our content is just hey, this is just for the kids. It's this specific part that we're going through. But every once in a while, it was usually during summer, our lead pastor would say, hey, I want to do a series together. And that was awesome, because usually he would allow it to kind of be fun, like something that kids would enjoy. But what that did was that parents and kids are talking about the same thing. We were learning the same lesson. So the kids' perspective, age appropriate for them, and the parents are learning there. So man, that just those conversations that were taking place. And then maybe talk about opportunities to fill the gap based on the campus or demographic that you guys have. Because one of our campuses, there are a few kids that will just walk to the campus because their parents want nothing to do with church. So they literally ride their bike over or walk, and we had to go, how do we check these kids in without a parent? But we figured it out. And so you have your own very unique demographic. Maybe you have a lot of single moms, stay-at-home moms. What can you do to help them? Lower income families and communities. How can you mobilize volunteers to connect with kids and families throughout the week to bridge the gap between weekends?
So just to recap, those three big things that we talked about: culture, scale, and needs. Those are going to look and be defined differently when you think about what are we doing inside the walls of the church, what are we doing outside. But that would really be the challenge, just to kind of walk away with as we recap, is what are the things that fulfill those categories? What are the gaps that we need to fill that help drive our culture, the culture that we want to create? How do we scale this? And what are the needs of our people in and outside of the church? So is it programming that requires less volunteers and less prep. Maybe it's organization of your programming. Maybe it is thinking more about how do we go? How do we become mobilizers of faith? How do we actively live on mission, which is the great commandment, or the great commission that Jesus gives to us, is like, go and make disciples. Well, what does that look like? How do we equip our kids to do that? And how do we reach our communities with that mission? How are you creatively connecting with parents? What is the best way to do that? What do your parents need? Do they need a social media reminder that things are happening? Do they just need prayer? What is your demographic? How are you involving parents and volunteers and maybe even the decisions within the ministry? How do you make them feel bought in so that they're regularly engaged, so that their kids become regularly engaged? And also, I think one of the cool things too is thinking about the volunteers that you have or the people involved in your teams and ministries is what are their unique giftings? We require, everything's very video based, so it is very press and play, but we still require someone to be up on stage facilitating a service. And there have been people on stage that maybe they're better in a small group. That's okay. We don't all need to be on stage. But really pressing into, hey, what are you great at? And how can you bring that into the ministry to help fill the needs of some of our kids and our demographics and our families? So being creative in some of those ways and very innovative in how you can place people well in a way that makes sense. Okay, so as a reminder and as an encouragement, I know we talked at the beginning of like the culture is changing and everybody hates church. It's not true. The church is still very much prevalent, it's important, and it's valuable. And so this is just an encouragement to be creative in your thinking, to try things, and they may not work, but then you learn from that. Be innovative, invite the right people in, maybe people that aren't even part of kids ministry, but say, hey, I would love your thoughts and ideas. Maybe it's a parent, maybe looking at outside organizations and going, okay, like Tom's is doing something really cool. Is there something there that might work for our model and our mission at our church? And so for us, it was authenticity, but that was a great way to engage and connect families. Yeah.
And I would just say, give yourself grace as you're developing this. Like, I don't know where you guys are at, and I'd love to actually take some time to hear from you guys. But maybe this is too much, or it's like, how could we scale? But as you guys saw in like the first video, we literally were just filming things with our iPhones and just like, let's just go run around and have fun. And it was, give yourself a year, give yourself time to grow and really try some stuff, and communicate that to like, hey, we're trying stuff. We want some feedback from you. But we didn't, it was basically Kelli and I did the majority of the videos. She did the majority of the writing. And as far as staff on our team, we had somebody who did graphic design. We had another writer and a project manager. And so we didn't staff with 40 people. Okay, how are we don't have anybody who we could hire. So this wasn't like 15 people coming together. Yeah, we had 8 videographers. It was looking at the gifts and talents of our volunteers. Oh, this person's really great at this. Like, let's have them build something like that. One of our strategies was whatever the main series was, whatever like they would do for their design, they would build some stuff on Easter. We would like take that when they were done and repaint it, so that way we didn't have to spend any of the kids' budget. So they like built boxes one time that were for Easter, and we took it and we reused it for our set, but we repainted everything. Yeah, so we were very scrappy, very scrappy. But yeah, you can do it with a small team. You can do it with 5 people. Give yourself grace, give yourself time, and grow.
So that's all we have, but we are here to answer questions. Like I said, if you guys want to look at anything, I also have stickers if you want to take a sticker home. But yeah, that's it for us, but we will totally hang out and chat more if you guys have anything you want to talk about.
Please,
How
yes.
many kids do you guys have? Like, I know you guys said you've grown for all of your churches, but when you guys first started, how was it and what is it now?
Yeah.
So I think when we first started, there were, and this is like K through 6th grade, probably like 300, I want to say. And now physically on the weekends, we're at about 2,500 kids across the board. But then we also have online watchers. Our church does something called Sandals Church Anywhere. And these are people all over the world that are doing church in their home. So those are other demographics and groups of people that are accessing the online content and using those resources. So I don't actually know the number because it's a lot. And we have YouTube viewers too. So yeah.
So originally, how many churches was it that you guys were overseeing?
So when we came in, it was two campuses.
Well, Remember Woodcrest
They
started,
launched.
and then when we did The Missing Piece.
Oh,
So the reason I say that is because they met outside for kids ministry.
yeah.
Okay.
So we did that detective series, and we were like, how do we build a set for them outside? I ended up borrowing set pieces from my old school that I went to, an elementary school, and it rained before, like the day before we started, and the entire set just was destroyed. And we said, oh, we need to like pivot and think about how do we do a version of the church for kids inside, outside, online, at just somebody's house. Yeah.
Yeah.
You said you work with K to 6th grade.
Mhm.
How does that, you work in service, are they all together at the time?
Great
Yeah, that's a
question.
great question. You want me to take it?
Sure.
Yeah, so our elementary K through 6th grade, the majority of our campuses, they are all together, which was one of those challenges, like how do you make a one size fits all video? And we have a process for how we did that. We have some campuses where 5th and 6th graders will go into main worship and then they'll go into their own room, but they'll watch the same video. But then we created spaces where they can have their own older conversation, because you do find 6th graders who are worshiping alongside kindergartners are like, this isn't cool. So we don't have that space at every campus. So most of them, they're together, but we do have some nuances where we can separate different age groups.
Yeah, how we structured the video was we looked at each age group and said, let's make sure there's at least one section of the video that's for them. And we're okay if there's a section of the video where the kids are like, they kind of tune out a little bit. So we'll do like a story part where we're just going through the Bible story, but then we'll also do an object lesson, which is a sticky way for them to remember that story. So some of the younger kids, man, I think you might have seen Kelly was like stuffing chocolate pudding in a flashlight. She was talking about, filling yourself with the right, with God, not with just like outside everything. And so she's like, will this flashlight work by putting chocolate pudding in there? Of course it wouldn't. No, we need the right stuff. So she put the battery in. And that's like our object lesson. So those kids who are younger, like, oh, that was really fun to watch. And then we also do a segment of that, just somebody sharing their testimony. And that's for the older kids, somebody sharing and we've got some real stories, some heartbreaking stories, but for our 5th and 6th graders, they love that. And some of those younger kids, by that point, they're like, they tune out, and we're okay with that. We're okay with the ebbs and flow of what kids want, because as long as one of those pieces sticks, that's what they remember.
What is the church do for preschool?
So for our early childhood kids, there was a period of time we were creating content for them, and that's where all those storybooks came into play, and we had someone on stage reading the storybook live. Just in terms of resources and time, we shifted away from that, and so our early childhood ministry uses Orange content now. If you guys are familiar with Orange, they're kind of big content creators. But yeah, it's now early childhood is video based. And then we make custom small group guides, custom discussion questions. We have a custom menu of activities. But that's what they use primarily for teaching. We also have our own custom worship songs and stuff that are used in early childhood as well, but they use an Orange video. Yeah.
Yeah, earlier in your presentation, you talked about inviting neighborhood kids over their parents.
Yes.
Right? I think is right?
Mhm.
But how did you get past that? Because, you have to have parents' permission, and there's all kinds of liability things.
Yeah.
I mean, walking across the street,
For sure, yeah. So it's a lower income area, and I actually wasn't in all of the logistics of how they did it because that was the big concern. But they figured, I honestly don't know the process, because it wasn't even us saying like, hey, come with us.
Yeah.
They just showed up. Sometimes without shoes, sometimes without jackets in like the winter. And so they figured out some sort of system, and I don't know if they identified like guardians or something. I honestly don't
some kind
know.
of permission form, or I don't know, because like I can't see kids crossing streets by themselves without their parents to get to church.
Oh,
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
And I think it became like, you're going to show up here. Like, we can either say you can't come in. And so I don't know the logistics of it. I'd be happy to find out and figure out how to get that information to you. There's someone else on our team that handles some of the inner operations of that, so I could find out, but I don't know all the logistics of how they figured that out.
Okay, second question is resources, right? So I said, my wife said Sunday school. So to access some of your resources, you said a lot of them were free.
Yeah, so
where would you go?
sandalskids.tv,
I'm sorry, what was it again?
sandalskids.tv is our online site. If you wanted to connect afterwards, I can even give you my email address. If you want to shoot me an email, I can share some specific Google Drive links with you to access some specific series that are all on sandalskids.tv. So I'd be happy to do that so you guys can sample that and look at it.
And what about some of the things you created?
Yeah, so we've, most of the things, let's see, do I have a Get Real guide? I don't. So, this is kind of an example. But yeah, for every series, for every week, we send our kids home with something called a Get Real guide. It's basically 8.5 by 11. I think there's outline ones in there. 8.5 by 11, custom designed. We do PDF downloadable versions of all that. So on sandalskids.tv, under the video, there's a button that says grab your guide. You can download a digital version of that. We also provide a small group guide if you have, like I said, our anywhere campuses all over the world. They might want to lead small
That's
group.
also on the-
That's there. And then we also have a parent guide. And a parent guide has discussion questions, an overview of the weekend, and a
So
hands-on
they do it
activity.
themselves at home.
Mhm.
That's-
Yeah.
So the sandalskids.tv, okay.
Yep.
I'm gonna show mine now. I like
Yeah,
knowledge
yeah.
here. Is that a video or is it a website?
So it's a website. So when you go there,
Instead of .com, you put .tv.
yes.
Um,
Yes.
That's what I was
It's like
curious about.
Yeah, yeah.
custom.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why. Yeah. So it's a website.
Okay.
Yep. And you
Yeah,
can
and so
click around.
attached to each video, there's a download section where it's like for the parents, for the kids, and you can download like everything.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thanks for making that.
Yeah.
Of course.
I love illustration. I wanted to be a Disney animator. And so that's why like our stuff has tended to go this way, where I could see if somebody was really, so one of the series we've never done is a series about sports because nobody, not for any reason, but because nobody on our team was like, knew anything about sports. And so we were like, we want to be authentic. So like a lot of our stuff led to our other graphic designer. We love the 90s. We're like, let's do a board game where it's, it's about Moses and the Israelites.
90s, is that what you just said?
Yeah, just things from the 90s. So we wanted to make like a series that was a board game where it was the Israelites going through the desert. And so it's our series was called Detour, Find God's Faithfulness in the Desert of Doubts. And that was a really fun theme. So the series are basically like 6 weeks long. And the reason we did that, I'll give the example that I've given to everybody, was if the kids were to show up and we showed them, well, I love Star Wars. I don't know how you guys feel. But if the kids showed up to church and we showed them Star Wars on the weekend, they would be like, this was awesome. We got our fruit snacks and our Cheez-Its and we watched Star Wars. And that would be pretty cool. They would want to come back for more. They show up next week and we show them Star Wars. Oh, sweet. Didn't we do this last week? Yeah, but some kids weren't here. Remember the whole once every 4 weeks thing? They show up the next week and we show them Star Wars. After a while, even though Star Wars is this great, they don't want to come to church and watch Star Wars again. And so we saw some of the curriculum that we bought and tested out that once it went on for a certain amount of time, kids were over it. I don't want to watch this anymore. Like, I want something different. And so for basically each like book of the Bible or each topic that we're talking about, we changed the theme. So we would do a superhero theme or a board game theme or a detective theme or a science theme. And it was always us because we went through that lens of it was supposed to be just us. And I love coming up with characters, but for us, we decided, hey, we're not going to do puppets and we're not going to do, nobody's going to like teach the Bible that isn't a real person. Nobody's going to share like that truth. So it really always needed to be whoever was teaching. And another thing that like we really honed in on is we didn't want it to feel like another day of school for them. Another like, okay, cool, I'm going back to class. And so some of those pre-show ideas that we threw out, we would make sure that Kelly and I, who would like teach some of the stuff, were a part of, because we wanted kids to get to know us, to build a relationship. Like, it's on video, so we want them to get to know us. We want them to like us, so that by the time we're going to share the gospel with them, they're like, okay, I'll give them the time of day. Because man, if we just came in, everybody open your books to like chapter 2, we're all going to take a test. I think it would be difficult for kids to resonate with us and feel like they would want to hear anything from that we were sharing. But that was just another like if you have a way for them to care about you, to like you, and then they'll be like, I will give you the time of day,
In the moon.
Yes. Oh yeah. It's on YouTube right now. It's called The Wild Library. Our YouTube channel is called Sandals Kids.
Yeah, so youtube.com////Sandals Kids.
Yeah, and so that one, I think Kelly mentioned that, but that was through Genesis. And
Yeah.
basically the concept of that one was that this girl, if you guys have ever seen The Page Master, I said I love the 90s. It was basically this girl who knows very little about the Bible. She goes into this library and the books of the Bible come to life. And so I think there was a shot in there, but we built a little mini library set so we could do the flood, which was really cool.
Was it mini?
Yeah, that was
The
my
library-
size.
That was it mini?
Well, the flood part, we built small scale shelves, and we poured water down it
Oh, I
and knocked
see.
them all over. But the rest were full size shelves.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was fun.
that was really fun because 12 bookshelves might sound like a lot, but it was not. And so we had like charts where we're like, if she's facing this direction, it should be like a right angle. Let's do a curved bookshelf. Let's do a hallway. And so we kind of, there was a lot of just thinking through how to make it fun and bring it to life. But yeah, you can watch it on YouTube. The whole thing's up there.
Were you guys ever part of the smaller church kids ministry? You guys volunteer or just part of the church and you had to leave or anything like that?
I mean, growing up, my church was smaller, so I did Awana and things like that and served in that way. You served, you were at Harvest. That was a bigger church.
Yeah. But we did plays. So I
Yeah.
knew all about Salty, the Singing Songbook, and the Donut Man, and VeggieTales, and Bible Man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My church had felt boards, so it was small.
Were you asking for observations?
Yeah, because my church, our whole congregation, including kids, volunteers, everything, we're at like 250
Okay.
every week.
Okay.
So we have 3 rooms.
Okay.
Infants, preschool,
Mhm.
K through 5th.
Mhm.
So with those kids, first service, sometimes we have 0 kids.
Okay.
Second service, I'll have, 15 in the oldest class, maybe around 10 in preschool and babies, and I've got 6. But yeah, and so I'm only part-time. And so I have so much that I want to pour in, but I'm just limited. And our church is just small. And so so I'm just I'm starstruck. It's I'm just in awe about all this because it's so cool. And it's definitely a spark for vision casting.
Oh, that's great.
But it's interesting to try to think of scale-wise of what a church needs and has and how to kind of fit different ideas.
Yeah. I even think too, some of our campuses are smaller campuses, and so there's almost this better opportunity to get to know kids even more personally, to say there's only 8 of you. I'm gonna sit on the floor with you and let's sit in a circle together and talk about the Bible story. For early childhood, one of the things that we encourage our leaders to do in there is utilize the toys in the room to do the Bible story. You don't just have to talk, but what are some of those ways to implement some of those developmental pieces? And yeah, what a cool opportunity to get to know the kids personally. And then maybe even there's small nuances within the services to say, hey, I know this group of kids, they really resonate with this type of teaching or this type of interaction, and we'll make a little shift for the next service because it's a different group of kids. So yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and you're not limited because you're small.
One of our campuses that's smaller, and I love the smaller campuses. My favorite service to serve at was the 8 o'clock service because it's the least amount of kids. We would actually really get to talk. And how was your week? Where when you have tons of kids, you just don't have time to connect with them all in that way. But one of the campuses, they have a playground, and so but none of the other campuses do, and so they'll take the kids out on the playground and do the lesson there. And so that's just a way of going, what's our unique bent that we could do at our church? What's a cool way that we can meet them? Yeah. So I love the intimacy and relationship you build with the smaller group. Another thing too that we didn't mention. So because we did do Awana, I grew up doing Awana, and at least for me, it was very much when I was learning the verses, I learned them for the incentives, but I didn't remember them. Right? So our incentives were to get you to come back, but it's just fun stuff. And so we even put our daughter in our Awana, and then I tested her a few weeks later, and she didn't remember anything. I was oh, what could we do? So our strategy was, because we have some people who love writing music, was for each series, we would choose a verse of the Bible and verbatim, the exact translation, that would be the words in the song. And man, obviously, like if you can put something to music and memorize it that way, you like never lose it. So I've learned like 40 verses just because of song. And so we did 2 songs per series when it was possible. When it was too much, we couldn't do it. But one would be like the theme of the series. We did like a series called Beyond Bounds, with the idea being God bends heaven and earth to meet you. It's about his miracles. And so like the theme would be how God goes beyond bounds to meet you. He goes out of his way. And then I can't remember what the actual verse for that one was.
So it was Luke 18:27. What's possible for people is possible with God.
Yeah. And so that was one of our strategies. So that's like one of those like, okay, I didn't wanna, she didn't wanna, our kids didn't wanna, but it's not sticking. How do we make these things stick? And so we chose to, like, as we were making it, put it to music.
And all of our music's on our YouTube channel. So if you want to access, there's a playlist of all the songs. Feel free to use it.
On the music channel?
So there's on our YouTube page, there's a playlist of all of our worship songs. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yes.
So I mean, I have a kindergartner who gets to absorb all this content. And both my husband and I serve almost every Sunday, and so they have to be in the 2 services almost every week. And more listening to the volunteers, it's like the right people in the right space is a huge thing. And my son is one. And I think
That's fantastic.
After one service. But the other piece of this is it's helping us develop a love for the church and our children. That's one of our biggest things that we want to pass on to them. That's something I did not have growing up. So we talk about how we love serving. That's nice to pass along. And with love. And I can tell that it's getting in because almost every night we do a Bible study together. Of our stories. I'll tell something that I've never told them. Like, oh yeah, that was from church yesterday. I remember that. It's getting in there.
That's fantastic.
So it's exciting for me. Sweet, I feel that partnership. Even not necessarily seeing you guys every weekend, but the volunteers that are there and the staff that I expect is and they do really intentionally work with my son on certain things and different updates, and that's great.
Cool.
That's awesome.
I don't know if you guys mentioned this before, but that almost annually we get like a feedback.
Oh yes.
Parents. So we can say like, yeah, this is really working. Maybe this could help us out a ton. And we see things change too as we get that feedback. So that has been a huge change for our church, I think, and beyond kids. There's a culture of feedback.
Yes.
And
for sure.
I'm learning how to learn it. Every campus does it.
Yep.
I've gotten sort of
That is true.
The legal school.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for sharing. And can you verify for everyone, we did not pay you to say that, correct? Okay, fantastic.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, obviously, there are other ministries besides kids where people serve. And so if you attend a service and you have kids and then you serve at the service, if your kids are like, I hate going here, like, I don't want to do this twice, then that might be like, maybe we don't serve. And so then you're like, oh, we just lost a volunteer somewhere else. So that was a big strategy, was if kids are like, no, I'm good, I can stay with you, then that frees up the parents to be like, cool, then we'll serve in marriage ministry, we'll do the parking team, stuff like that. Well, great.
If anything else, we'll be around. You guys can come look at stuff, grab a sticker if you'd like. But otherwise, thanks so much for being here. And then, if you wanted me, I can get your email and I can send you some samples.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you
So much.
Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you.